Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
Hey everyone, John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show. And if you are new to this show, go subscribe and check out some of the other episodes. We've got great past episodes and interviews with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs, breaking down the relationships that help them get where they are today. Check out Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, Lending Tree. They're all in the archives for you for free. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And my guest today is Rich Russakoff. He is a business coach, a speaker, an author, and a serial entrepreneur, bringing 45 years of experience successfully starting and developing businesses, working with CEOs and other entrepreneurs, training, consulting, and business brokering. He is the author of the book, Make Banks Compete to Lend You Money, the Complete Guide to Business Loans, which is known as the Bible of bank financing. He also authored the chapter, Mastering the Art of Bank Financing, in the book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits by Verne Harnish, which is a book that I keep on my desk every day to make sure it's within arm's reach. That is literally my Bible. His newest book is The Art of Managing People, Time, and Money, Inspiration and Wisdom for Every Entrepreneur. And of course, before we get started, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. You can go check us out at rise25.com to learn more about what we do. And Rich, such a pleasure to have you here today. And, you are legendary within the EO community, which I belong to. It's a great community. You've spoken, you've participated in various different training programs. But I want to start at the beginning of your journey. You very first business was you started a business in the 1970s on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And it was a jewelry and gift business. How did that end up happening? And it sounds like you're like a young guy starting a jewelry business, which to me sounds really intimidating.
Well, I evolved into the jewelry business. Ironically, my first wife and I moved to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and she had a teaching job. And we loved the Outer Banks in the 70s. We wanted to stay, but we didn't want to stay in teaching. And I thought it would be a great place to start a business. So there was this little cottage we rented, and we sold three things there. We sold recycled clothes, which came from my parents' dry cleaning operation in Philadelphia. We sold health foods that came on consignment from a health food store that went out of business. And we started selling jewelry and crafts. Within about a month, all the clothes that were worth any value were cherry picked. So we were out of that business. And the natural foods business was okay, but we loved selling crafts and jewelry and working with local artists. And the business was growing in this little tiny shop. And there was a shop that opened up, a location right down the block, terrific, with a parking lot. We went in there and we brought in a jeweler, a potter, a leather craftsman, and we started selling jewelry and gifts. And that evolved into a destination resort location. And we ran that for 9 years. And I learned so much about running a business. And the first thing I would tell anybody that's starting is understand the numbers of your business. I thought you bought for 5, you sold for 10, and by magic, you made money. Took me a while to learn you made your money in the buying and how to really understand a balance sheet. And what was very helpful to us was being able to get bank financing to get an SBA loan to get it started. And I went to a local bank and I said, this is what we want to do. He said, my wife shops. She knows your business. It sounds great. What do you have for collateral? And I said, what's collateral? And he said, what's your tangible assets? And I said, I have $3,000 in inventory. So he said, well, that's not going to get us anywhere. He said, there's this new program called SBA, and maybe we can make that happen. I said, what do we have to do? He said, you need to be turned down by 3 banks. I said, does this count as one? Yes. I walked across the street and the banker
got 2 more.
I had a beard and long hair, and the banker was a retired Air Force colonel. And he said to me, are you dealing drugs? And I said, Mr. Green, if I was dealing drugs on the Outer Banks, I could be loaning you money. He said, son, nobody's going to loan you money. I said, does this count as a no? He said, yes. Then I went to a 3rd bank, got my 3rd town down and turned down. And now I was ready to go back to the 1st bank, get the loan, get started, and grow the business. It was a very exciting time in my life.
Now, there are lots of little craftsy businesses that oftentimes struggle, or maybe they last for a few years. What were a couple of the lessons that you learned from that business, maybe about systematizing or growing it? How did you distinguish it in a touristy area like the Outer Banks?
Well, first of all, it was in the 70s, and we were considered pioneers in what we did. And because we had live craft people in the shop and actually a kiln outside, and we could announce on our billboard kiln opening at a certain time, it attracted people. Also, over the years, we learned how to buy and what to buy. And we bought jewelry from Nepal that was from Tibetan refugees, Mexico, jewelry from all over the world, estate jewelry, antique jewelry. And jewelry is a marvelous thing because you can pass it down from generation to generation. And we became a destination shop. We even had a bead counter where people would come in, and we'd have about 50 different kinds of beads, and they make their own necklaces there. And we
cool.
learned the art of retail. For example, we sold cards. And one of the reasons we sold cards was if you buy a card, you slow down. And if we get you to slow down and you buy a card, you're going to buy other things. And our card selection.
Oh, like postcards.
Yes.
Like postcards. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, not postcards, cards that you sign.
Oh, greeting cards.
We spent 2 days in New York just buying cards.
Yeah, because it brought people in.
Yes.
Yeah. Now you had a bachelor's degree from Temple. You had done radio in college, communication, a degree in business communication. You also mentioned that you came from a family that had done a dry cleaning business. So would you consider yourself from a family of entrepreneurs? Did you learn?
Actually, I'm a 3rd generation entrepreneur. And I was very fortunate. I grew up. The first place we lived was upstairs from our first dry cleaning store. Then I lived behind the second one. And every Saturday and every summer and every holiday, I worked for my parents, and I learned a work ethic. I learned values. I learned how to treat customers and how to take pride in what you do. And that probably was that was worth far more than college.
And so then was that what you brought to the jewelry business more so than the business training that you got in college, the education you got in college?
Well, I really didn't get any business training in college, but I majored. You
got a degree in it.
I majored in communications, and we were able to do some very unusual marketing things. We published something called the Junction Journal, which we put into hotels and restaurants. We promoted business that were our frenemies or competitors, and nobody could figure, how are these guys doing this? What are they doing? So it was a great opportunity to bring out all the creative side in what I was doing. And I loved selling. I loved buying. I loved working with people and the marketing side of the business.
And you end up selling that business. And then that's what brought you to your next interest, which was brokering business. So buying and selling businesses, helping others to buy and sell businesses. Talk a little bit about how you developed that interest and that next stage in your career.
Well, first of all, after I sold my business, I became fascinated with the dynamics of how businesses change hands. And if I had had me as a broker then, I would have done much better with the sale.
Did you sell it with a broker or sell it on your own?
I pretty much had somebody walk in the door and say they wanted to buy it. And I had a lawyer help me that didn't know what he was doing. And basically, I wanted to learn more about it. So I relocated to Richmond, Virginia, and joined a brokerage franchise called VR Business Brokers. And pretty much we did mom and pop deals.
And tell me a little bit about kind of some of those different transactions and kind of the role that you played with people buying and selling businesses. Because that's, for many business owners, many entrepreneurs, that's, one of the biggest transaction, if not the biggest transaction of their lifetime. So there's a lot of emotion that goes into it.
Yeah, and they call it the biggest sale you ever make. In theory, should be the selling of your business.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I had someone that I was working with. I had a project with Valpak Direct Marketing years ago, and I developed a resale program for Valpak dealers. And this woman said to me, I want to sell my business. And I said, what do you want for it? She said, $3 million. I said, well, here's where you are now. And here are the things you need to do to take it to that $3 million value. And she said to me, in other words, if I want to get out of it, I need to get into it. And the things that you do every day to make your business successful are the key things that a buyer will look for. And what I've learned over the years there are two types of buyers. There's the buyer that the sale that's going to be a multiple of earnings, and then the strategic sale. And I'm working with a client right now, and we're putting together a deal that it's a strategic sale, which will ultimately generate $40 million to him, the way we're looking at it. $12 million in cash at the close from a venture capital firm that wants the business to be part of a roll-up. And we're asking for 11.5 million in shares that when they flip it should bring in at least 2.5 times. And that's how we'll get to the $40 million level. But the thing is, he's got a great business. He owns a market. And when VC capital starts talking to you, even if you don't think you're for sale, you might find a common ground. I have another client that I worked with for 20 years who was the model CEO and father and great human being. And we were able to get 44 million because that was his number and he held out for it. And so if you do the right things, you can generate a lot of money. The thing is, you need to make sure you have good financials. Do you have a stable customer base? And do you have a leadership team that if I'm a buyer, I want? I have a client looking to buy a business right now. We're very close to a deal, but he's looking to acquire to grow. And the best way for him to grow is through acquisition. So there's a lot of reasons to buy or to sell. The reason people generally sell, and the first thing I asked for when I was talking to a prospective seller is, what are you going to do afterwards? And I find if people don't know what they're going to do next, they're really not ready to sell unless they've reached these things. They burnt out, which is the reason why people sell. And we can talk about that more as we get into some of the other subjects that we're talking about. But it's health, age, relocation, divorce, disputes, can't handle it, want to upgrade, or they're tired or bored. Those are the reasons you look for. And on the case of the buyer, is the buyer truly motivated to buy?
So just drilling down on the piece about being tired of running the business, which is a common one. What are some of the ways in which you would advise someone who comes to you and says, "I got this business. I'm just tired. I want to walk away"?
Well, there's a couple things I would ask first. First of all, I would ask, what are you doing in the business? Where are you putting your time and energy? And perhaps it's not so much that you're tired or bored with the business. You're not putting your energy where you're getting your love and energy back. But if you say you want to sell, I want to look at your numbers. I want to look at what we can do to energize you, to put the business in the best position to find a buyer. And that's the critical piece. But I work with clients where we've looked at their business, and it's a good, solid business, but it's the wrong pond for them. They need to go from being the swan that's the ugly duckling into a pond where they're the swan and they're doing what they love. So it's really more than anything else about high energy, doing what you love and doing what you do best. And if you're not doing that, then it may be time to get out of the business and yes, move on, sell it. And life is too valuable not to be doing what you love.
So I'm always drawn to the hardest possible scenario. So and maybe this isn't the hardest possible scenario, but it's maybe what the hardest I can dream up. So a business owner comes to you, they're tired. They want to hang it up. They don't want to do it anymore. But it becomes clear to you that in order for them to get into that better pond, as you said, and be the swan and all that kind of stuff, that they need to double down on the business first before they can sell it. How do you convince someone to go back to the business that they're tired of running and say, you got to get more into it if you want to get out of it?
So, John, let's say it's you.
Yeah.
What are your goals? What do you want? Let's role play it. Let's have fun.
We'll role play it. I love it. Okay, cool. I love being with my kids, got young kids. I love vacations in the summer, spending time with them.
Okay. So if we're able to get the price you want for your business, will you be able to put the time in necessary so that you can get there? Go through a little purgatory so that you can get to heaven's gate. And if not, who can do it for you or with you? Because if you don't, you won't get the value for everything you put in. On the other hand, if you went out tomorrow, we can probably find you a buyer quickly. What's important to you? What are your values here, John?
Well, I guess in that context, my values are, setting us up for the long term, spending more time with family, but I'm willing to sacrifice in the short term in order to be able to, preserve or to get a big sale that would result in a good payday that can, pay for my kids' college and things like that.
So then let's put together a plan. Let's take a look at where you are. What will make your business more attractive to a buyer? Because this is really about your new customer is the prospective buyer. And what are the things we can do that will attract a buyer? First of all, let's look at your financials. Are they credible? Will a buyer buy into them? if you don't have audited financials, let's start getting them reviewed. Let's take a look at your leadership team. Do you have the right people? Let's take a look at your profits and your margins, and let's see where we can tweak it, because a little change in what you bring to the bottom line with a multiple will make a big difference. Also, perhaps there's a strategic buyer for you. And if we find a strategic buyer for you, because what you have, they can take their skills, their resources, their network, their infrastructure, and make much more for it, then that's what we want to shoot for. And let's figure out how we can make that happen for you.
That sounds great. I want to ask you about Inc. Magazine. So you became a coach for the Inc. Magazine coaching division, which really kind of helped fuel your career for a number of years. How did that come about?
It was immensely invaluable to my career. I was at a franchise convention, and I met a wonderful man by the name of Jim Wood there. And he was representing Inc., and Inc. was looking to get into working with franchises, and they knew nothing about franchises. So we started talking about my being a potential coach for them when they found franchises, because I had really gotten to understand the franchise industry, and I was on a couple committees on the International Franchise Association for a while. Mm-hmm. They didn't find a franchise for me, but they found a business, and they said, we'd like you to go talk to these people. So I talked to this lady, Mary Hughes, about her business. We looked how she had too much inventory, how we were going to get rid of that inventory, things we were going to do. And I started coaching for them. And that took me all over the country. And I was also speaking at in conferences. It was under a previous ownership, and they got out of the coaching business and with the new owners, and the speaking business changed. But that's how I found one of the most important clients I ever worked with, a client by the name of Four Hands in Austin, Texas. That's how I found EO, because one day Linda Burton said, we are a sponsor of Birthing of Giants, and we have a spot on the speaking program.
And this Birthing of Giants is, I know Verne Harnish, the founder of EO, is involved in, and now called EMP, or Entrepreneurial Master's Program.
Yes. So she said, Rich, we'd like you to represent us. The guy last year was so bad that we're going to lose our spot. All you have to do is hit a home run, no pressure. And it was my audience. It was entrepreneurs, high growth entrepreneurs from all over the world. Mm. And
they gather at MIT, right?
Yes. And by the way, anybody in the EO network, I strongly recommend you join it. It's a 3-year program. The speakers are terrific, but more importantly are the connections you make with entrepreneurs. In business, 3 years is a lifetime. Yeah. People go public, people go out of business, all sorts of things happen, and many become friends for life. Mm. So that opened up a tremendous door for me. And I've been on the program for the last 20 years, with the exception of the years the COVID years. And I'm on the program again in June, and I'm going to do a program on finding and living in your zone of genius, both in your personal life as well as your business life.
I also want to ask you about, you found that with Inc., you were involved in studying companies that made the Inc. 500, and you found, and this is just phenomenal to me, 18 to 20% of those businesses are out of business in 2 years. What happens?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, in 1987, we studied the class of 85, and our goal was to find the silver bullet. But what we really found was what's going on that all these companies that succeeded when it was the Inc. 500, not the Inc. 5000. So we started studying that, and we determined it wasn't the industry, it wasn't the ability to raise capital, it was the critical decisions that entrepreneurs made at each stage of growth. And what gets you to one level will not get you to the next level, and you have to reinvent yourself. So 1 to 10 people in a company is mission driven. 10 to 25 is operations driven, and it's very exciting. You're hiring leaders, you're growing, you've established your niche. And in that first phase where systems and procedures weren't necessary, and it was driven by creativity and mission. In the second phase, what you're focusing on is the operations side. The third phase, from 25 to 50, is the transition from mom and pop to a professional company. And I call that purgatory, because everything breaks down. Communication breaks down. The systems that used to work, you have to throw them out and start all over. There's a lot of chaos there. And when I explain to entrepreneurs that that's why they're in such turmoil, it's not just them, it's the nature of growth. So that's one thing we learned, and we thought he had it in a neat bow. And then my wife and I studied conscious living and conscious loving with Gay Hendricks and Catherine Hendricks. And Gay Hendricks wrote a book called Taking Your Big Leap. And when I read the book, 2 things jumped out at me. One was that if you're spending your time in what you love doing, you're going to do well. So there's like 4 zones. There's your zone of incompetence. You don't want to do anything in your zone of incompetence. There's your zone of competence. You're okay.
Yeah.
But you're not good at it. The trap is the zone of excellence. You're really good at it, but you don't have your heart in it. It's not where time stands still. I'm a coach. When I coach, time stands still. When I speak, time stands still. So how do we get entrepreneurs out of that zone of excellence into doing what they love and have other people do that? And if you're stuck in that zone of excellence, that's where you burn out. And when you burn out, your energy is no longer positive. You're not making the right decisions. And that's a reason to go. And there's one other piece he talks about, the upper limits barriers. The upper limits barriers are these voices inside of you that say, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve this success. I'm leaving other people behind, or I don't want to stand out. And so there's 4 upper limits barriers, and you self-sabotage because you don't think you deserve it. And it's how do you work your way out of those upper limits barriers? For me, I was a terrible student. And my parents would say, you're lazy. I'm not lazy. I just sucked at academics. And it's if there hadn't been a book on emotional intelligence, I wouldn't have known I had any intelligence at all. Finding where those upper limits barriers are. For example, I have a client that I'm working with, a wonderful guy. And when he was born, his father was 40. His father was traveling all over the world, and he didn't get to spend the time with his father that his much older brothers and sisters did. And he felt he was a burden. And sometimes when you're very successful, you feel like you're a burden on other people. And so these upper limits barriers cause you to self-sabotage or hold back and not enjoy. And that is a much greater factor as to why people burn out or self-sabotage and fail in business. And who knows, it might have been why Will Smith, 10 minutes before he won an Academy Award, did something that totally self-sabotaged from an upper limits barrier. So I look for those in clients and how they overcome them. And I say to parents, be careful how you raise your kids so that they don't have these upper limits barriers that hold them back. I recommend everybody read the book, or I'll be happy to do a workshop on it so that you understand the importance of overcoming them and also working in your zone of genius.
And I want to ask you, you touched on it earlier, Four Hands of Austin. It was a company that when you started working with them, they were at 60 million. And
no, they were about
6 million, and took them to about 50 million. Talk a little bit about what they did and what brought them to you, what they were challenged by when they came to you.
Well, first of all, they had a wonderful model. And the CEO, Brett Hatton, who was the founder, he's no longer the CEO, had a great vision. And I was a sounding board for him. We did strategic planning, but Brett was a brilliant entrepreneur. Now, the funny thing is, Brett was a great leader, but not a great manager. When I first met him, he used to talk to 10 people in the warehouse and piss off 11. But people would follow him as a leader. So we needed to find the right manager who could talk to people and motivate them and let Brett be the leader and the visionary. We needed to find the right financial person so he had the right financial information. We went from him getting financing from friends, family, and fools to SBA to working with a factoring company because at the time, they really didn't know how to manage their receivables. And that was a wonderful solution to them, to finally working our way up to a VIP relationship with Chase Bank, to ultimately leading Brett to sell 48% of the company so he could take money off the table. And I met with them 1 week a quarter at Four Hands, went to the furniture shows with them, traveling. But what Brett had was a great vision. He's a great leader. He made wise, strategic decisions along the way. And he recognized playing to his strengths and building the team around him that could make them such a successful company. It was an international company in scope. We had people working for us from all over the world. We were transparent in our numbers. We rewarded people financially. If we succeeded, they succeeded. And it was a marvelous learning experience for me and a great relationship. And Brett and I are in the process right now. Sometime in the second half of the year, we're going to write a business fable based upon Brett's story.
That's great. I can't wait to see that. But before then, you have another book that is coming out. Your newest book is The Art of Managing People, Time, and Money, Inspiration and Wisdom for Every Entrepreneur. I know we're running a little short on time, and I want to be respectful of your time, but in 2 or 3 minutes, tell us a little bit about the book, the most recent book, and what inspired it.
Well, I started writing a daily post called Food for Thought about 3.5 years ago. And every day I write a post, and I made the decision that I would write about whatever I wanted to write about. So I wrote about business stories, things I've learned along the way, people that have influenced me. And because I'm working with businesses on a day-to-day basis, I'm always finding new things to share and talk about. And those posts became the first book, People, Time, and Money. And now we're doing the second version of it, and that will come out in July. So I've written about 500 posts, and we're just pulling out the best posts for them with the focus on managing people, managing money, and most importantly, managing your time and your energy, and also strategic thinking and planning and how to be the best leader and the best person you can be. I like to say I'm the CEO for CEOs, which means the Chief Encouragement Officer, helping people get the best out of themselves and saying, yeah, go for it. You can do that. That works.
I love that.
Hold on, you're jumping off the diving board and you don't know if there's water in the pool.
That's great. And then I want to wrap up with the last question I always ask, which is my gratitude question. So if you look around at peers and contemporaries, people that have helped you along the way, who've been there for you, who you'd want to acknowledge publicly, who would you want to just call out and recognize them for what they've done or who they've been for you?
Well, I mentioned the importance of Brett Hatton. Another client I worked with for over 20 years was a man by the name of Damon Gersh, who just sold Maxon's Restoration in New York. And what I love about Damon, not only was he terrifically coachable, but we focused as much time on Damon's personal goals and life. And Damon introduced me to the concept of not work-life balance, but work-life integration. And he really tied it all together. He goes to spring training every year. He's taken his kids all over the world. He's on a softball team. He's in a band. He started an association. He started a festival in his village for the arts, his village in Long Island. And so he's lived his life to the fullest with integrity, and he's been a tremendous friend and inspiration to me.
That's a great story. Rich, this has been a pleasure talking to you. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, and learn more about the work that you do?
First place is my website, coachtothebest.com. And that's what I love to say I do. I coach to best. Or you can reach me at rich@coachtothebest.com, which is my email address.
Excellent, Rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a treat.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.